Well, thank you all for being parts of the initial S4K Sharing Team panel. This panel is designed to be a safe place to share thoughts, feelings, and opinions around a given topic or topics that face teens in our community today. So why don't you go around and everybody introduce yourself. Tell us your name and your age and where you're from.
All right, well, I'm Tyler Buford, and I'm 17 years old, and I'm from Houston, Texas.
And I'm Taylor Buford. I'm 15 years old, and I'm from Houston, Texas.
I'm Andrea. I'm 16 years old, and I'm from Linden, Utah.
I'm Josh, and I'm from Conwood Heights, Utah, and I'm 17.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to the panel. Glad you could all be here. So today we're going to talk about a cool topic. We're going to have a nice debate talking about a little bit about racial injustices. Racial injustices are spreading across the world. It's been a hot topic, especially last year, heading into this year. Recently, a school in North Ogden, Utah, gave parents the choice to opt their children out of Black History Month activities. And after receiving some backlash, the school later removed that opt-out option. That's a tongue twister. So a local news station, KSL, they ran an article featuring my friend and filmmaker, Gianfranco Fernandez Ruiz. I apologize if I didn't say that right.
And that was good.
And he shared, they basically ran this story about him and his responses to the decisions made by this North Ogden school. So that's what we're going to debate and talk about today. So kind of the questions that we can discuss and talk about together among everybody is basically, you know, how you feel, how do you guys feel that, do you think basically like teaching Black history in schools, will that help to eliminate racism? And what are your thoughts about it being taught, teaching Black history in schools? So let's go ahead, let's talk about it.
Okay, so my stance on the whole thing about teaching in school and will it help eliminate racism, I'm kind of half and half. First, I'm like, okay, if you teach them at a young age, they will know like what not to do and what to do. But essentially, we have to remember that racism is basically taught. So we start to remember that they also go to back home. So what is their environment like? Is their parents saying it? Is their grandma saying it? So I think it will help in some way where you basically helping the youth out and teaching them, try to steer them in the right way. But I also say no, because it also goes back down to how much they spend their time in their environment.
Yes, and actually, me and Tyler, before we came on here, we kind of had a debate about it, because I was saying if they go home, then you never know what their parents or their guardian is teaching them, and he was saying, but still by being taught in school, it can probably change their mind on anything. So he kind of drive my point of view over to his side, kind of, with saying that. So I'm gonna have to say it's half and half, same, because you never know. It's different for every situation.
I personally think on the topic that if it should be taught, I think it should be taught because we still learn history about this country. So why not learn about Black history? Because it's part of this country and it's something that needs to be learned, because if we never learn it, we're never going to know the struggles that Black people went through, what's actually going on. And I think that learning about it won't take away racism, but it will help. It just would take a long time, because as Tyler and Taylor were saying, it's, you don't know what's going on at home. It can be taught to us. And I think that a lot where parents do influence their children's point of view, but if we start at a young age, we can teach what is right and wrong, and hopefully in later generations, racism will go down as we keep teaching kids.
Yeah, I agree with everyone here. I think it's less, personally, just me, less half and half and more just kind of a case-by-case study with each kid, because I think everyone is a free thinker obviously. And there are always those kids that, even if they're raised like that, they'll start breaking out of the mold. And I think that's already happening a lot, at least, where children are thinking different than their parents. And I think eliminating Black History Month is just eliminating history. Like, it's another show sign of how in the past Black history has been erased, and how if we just let it pass, then it will keep being erased.
Yeah, and I think you said the main thing that stuck with me was, people are breaking out the mold. And we can also say that with education. If we do keep implementing Black history, how are we going to do it? Are we going to do it, year round, or is it just going to happen during Black History Month? We also have to go through that, and then we have to integrate that into, the curriculum, because you still have to get taught certain things because of, you have certain tests. So I think we ultimately should, but we also have to come up with a plan to basically integrate them fully, because, some people may disagree with it, because people may feel like it's not our history, but it really is, because if everyone's here, we're all united. We should basically get taught everybody history.
That's a great point with the everybody history thing. I feel like all history in America has an impact on itself today. Surely, as we've seen with the recent protests coming the summer of 2020, and shedding light of things like how Black people in our country are disproportionately incarcerated and such and such and such. And I think that comes with, while it becomes with an awareness, there's a big ignorance behind it too, with people trying to disprove it almost. And the school thing will really help with awareness. And I think the plan is definitely the first step into all of it.
Yeah, I feel like education is a really good point, because once people start to learn, people become aware, because we saw that a lot what happened last year. Some people started learning about the struggles in the Black community, and I saw through social media, yeah, there were a lot of arguments and everything, but there was so many people that did change their point of views, and some people oh, I didn't know that, or oh, I was told a lie about this. So it was really cool to see last summer to how much people were being educated and everything. And it's sad that it had to come to that for us to learn. But if schools actually cared, then we should learn about Black history as well, because it's something really important we all need to know about.
Yeah, and you said it right. And what I was also thinking is, with this whole Black history thing and integrating in schools, what age group or what grade are we going to actually implement this in? Who can handle what, and how can it actually tie into the curriculum base? So that's what I was trying to figure out. What type of age group are we going to really give this test out to, or give this history out to?
Everyone needs to be taught it and retaught it, like how in science you're taught about sedimentary rocks in 5th grade and then taught about it again in 8th grade, 3 grades apart. I think maybe not every year, but definitely elementary, middle, and high school, and most definitely, if needed, college, definitely needs to be implemented, because people forget, and as you forget something, the details become more shrouded, and people, whoever they are, whether bigoted or otherwise, can change your point of view on things without you really even noticing.
I feel like a good age would be around 5th or 6th grade, because that's when kids start to listen. We actually start oh, what's right or wrong. But history isn't really taught until middle school, 7th grade. I feel just start early, so we can keep learning and learning as we grow up, because as we get older, we speak more freely. We start to be friends with more people. We start to create our own ideas separate from our parents, what they taught us. So if we start at that age where we're starting to think for our own, I feel that would be really helpful.
And I feel that it should be taught at an early age, and then maybe let's say in 5th grade it should be taught again in 6th, almost every year, to kind of get it in our minds for it. So if you want to change your point of view, you will have others' point of view on it. So something like that, I feel it should be taught, so we won't forget about it, so we can really learn the history behind it.
Okay, so I'm gonna go off on the deep end on this one. So the question on a topic basically was about did the school deserve to opt the kids in, opt them out? So do you guys think the parents ultimately have that choice? Because that's ultimately what it really comes down to. Does the parents really have that choice to do that? And then do you think it's justifiable if they do take out their kids, out of that program?
I feel like, cause like we don't like our parents don't choose if we learn history or not. So why did the school give parents the option about learning about Black history? It's still history and it needs to be learned about. So why was that option given? Like you can already see that there's there's like how do I say this? Like they already have like a bad concept of it. So like why are they giving that choice when we're required to learn history, so why can't we learn about all history? So I don't know why that choice was given to the parents in the first place.
We have to learn about every history, but essentially, we also have to come down to is, we do have, ignorant people in the world, and we do have people with different opinions. So do you think that their basically views are kind of justified, because what happens is when you take your kids out of that, out of that learning the history, what does that do to the kids? They already start off on a bad foot of, okay, I didn't learn about the Black history. So that kind of disadvantaged them than other people. So how do you feel about that?
In my view, no matter what, the kid's going to learn about it, like eventually, like maybe not the full picture or like a detailed picture, but eventually all of us are going to realize like the KKK, everything there has to, like every struggle, every hardship that Black people have faced in the history of this country, they're going to learn to some extent about. And so even from like an ignorant parent's perspective, it's not exactly the smartest decision, because if the child ends up learning about it and they're one of those like super free thinkers that are like, normal and aren't racist, they're going to resent someone for not having taught them about this sooner, so they could have done something about it.
Yeah, and I agree with what everyone's saying, but at the same time, we have to look at some parents just don't want their kid to learn about Black history. You have to realize that, and I feel like that option for them, that was, justifiable option. If you don't want your kid to learn about that, your kid don't have to learn about it. But like Josh said, sometimes your kid is gonna learn about it, like no matter what. So I agree with you guys.
That's an interesting point, Taylor. And the thought that I had, or the question I had, is why? Why would a parent not want their child to learn about Black history? Because it's just history. I mean, there doesn't have to be a color title to it.
The implication of like opting out of Black history means that someone could opt their child out of white history. Like it just doesn't like make sense for the option to be opting out of Black history, because it's a history that serves its purpose, and that all history serves its purpose is so that we don't make the same mistake again. In general, that's what history is usually about, to teach us what mistakes we made in the past so we can't make them again. And something like opting out of Black History Month is, in my view, inherently racist, because you're willingly deciding to push aside that area of pain and struggle that happened in favor of your own comfort, which is so horribly selfish.
Yeah, and I think everyone touched on it. Essentially, why? Honestly, I really don't know why, because, like Josh and Andrea said, it's just history. It's a part of, our timeline. And like Josh said again, we teach these things not to make the same mistakes. So essentially, with you opting out, are you trying to make the same mistake? Are you trying to go back in that same direction? So I think that's the thing we have to actually look at also, with these parents, what are their motives? Well, what are their plans? Because obviously, if they're not teaching their kid about Black history at this age, what's going to go down, 5-10 years down the line, you're going to just basically keep having the same generational problem.
I want to get John in on this conversation, and I'm going to read one of his quotes directly from the news article, and then if you could, John, if you can expound on that, and we can debate and talk about that. So when we hear something like Black history can be opted out of in a time where the rest of the country is trying to mobilize and make this thing a standard, that Black history is American history, it terrifies me. It feels like an attack to me personally. I want to break down that wall because really, this has nothing to do with my political views as a person. I'm feeling like I am not counted as one of you. And that is a problem here in Utah. That's how it affects me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting hearing a lot of you guys, these bright young minds, people of color, and I love that. I'm right here, y'all. I'm right here. Let's talk a little bit about this. Let's go to 1955. Okay, so you guys know slavery was something that was abolished far before that, way before 1955, and all for what seemed like a really long time, it seemed as there was no problem. Slavery had been abolished and people were freed, and it wasn't until 1955 where we learned something really, really kind of sad about America. There was a young man who whistled at a white woman, and when he whistled at the white woman, or so the story went, there was like a mob that went after him. He was a Black young man, and they killed him. His name was Emmett Till, and they left him in such poor shape that they took these images. They probably wanted to respect his mom, and they not to show anybody. And his mother was incredibly brave. She said, "Show it to the world. Everyone needs to know how bad this is, what they've done." Now, something really interesting happened years later. I'm talking like 5 years ago. The woman who said that Emmett Till like whistled at her, she admitted practically on her deathbed that he never had. He never whistled at her at all. And so this young man, he died for nothing. But he showed that there was still all of this disequity in the United States, which was crazy. Now, if we go just a little bit before that, slavery was abolished around that time period, there was a faction of people in the South that was still practicing slavery. To what extent, the people in the North had no idea, but it was still happening. And they had a similar sentiment, the same idea that if this is America and I have the ability to choose whatever it is that I see fit to bless my family, I don't have to opt into this idea that like Blacks are free and can, make life of themselves. And obviously, with that movement of the North finally picking up what was happening in the South because of all of the escaped slaves, we finally had really abolished it, even after it was abolished already. Don't we think that this is, and I don't mean this to be a yes or no kind of question, but isn't it kind of interesting to look at that kind of historical piece of information, to consider how slavery actually existed, and then when it was abolished, it was still existing because of the same faction of people that was going, if I want to opt out of not freeing the slaves, then I get to do that. I should be able to do that. My children and my progeny should be able to do that because this is America. Will this not lead at some point to another Emmett Till in 1955?
I totally agree with the part about, this can basically happen again. And then with your quote, I picked some words out of it. Basically is, how are, African Americans supposed to feel with this, because with this thing, people are basically saying, you're giving a choice to learn about Black history when it's a part of our history. So how are African Americans supposed to feel about this? Are we supposed to be happy? Are we supposed to be mad? How are we supposed to react? Because if this is a choice, what else can be a choice? Is murdering a Black man, is that a choice? So when do we set boundaries? When do we set limits to certain things that's supposed to be automatically morality right?
You are So right with that, because it's a whole like huge domino effect. Like once we let one thing slide, then what's to say we don't let this thing slide? And eventually the gap between what the first thing and the last thing is so huge that
Exactly.
it's almost out of our control at that point. And history repeats itself all the time. We see it happen almost every day. And to say that if we continue to let things like this just like go under the radar, who's to say that there won't be another Emmett Till sometime?
Yeah, I really agree with what you guys are saying, because like history does repeat itself, and like we did see that happen a lot last year. Especially we kept seeing like more and more people being judged, like more and more racism, and like it does happen, and like we really can't say if it will happen again or not.
Now, in order for us to draw the line, in my opinion, I think there should be, I get the whole freedom of speech and everything, but I think in order to really put it into this, there got to be some certain laws or some certain, penalties that should be, taken forth, because like me, Josh, and Andrea said, once you start letting things go, there's going to be a whole different things that you're going to allow to go under the rug, and people are going to start thinking it's okay. More people are going to start thinking, okay, we can opt out of Black history and everything like that. So I believe we should, start making laws, to basically say, hey, I get the whole freedom of speech thing, but hello, this is our history too. Basically to send a message to African American people, we are with you also.
Yeah, I feel like how you were saying, so we saw this a lot last summer. People like aren't held accountable. So like what I witnessed a lot is like on social media, like a lot of people that were against like BLM and everything, they were like saying all these things, and like people were getting mad. They're like, hey, like that's not right. They were sending threats. They like reported them, and then people like finally were being held accountable, and people were calling this generation soft and everything. But no, we were doing what was right and holding people accountable. And then people like, I feel like for a while, like it kind of reduced like all like the hate and the racism, because people didn't want to be held accountable, because like we've never done it and people always speak freely. But like we did draw a line throughout the summer and like when everything was happening, and we did see that happen for a small period of time.
Do you guys think that the whole opting out of something like that, opting out of Black history, do you think that that falls, that the schools can say, well, that does fall under freedom of speech?
I say no, because it's like saying like, what if I said I don't want to learn about white history? Let me opt out. How would everyone react? So like, how come people have a negative reaction? Like if I say something, I don't want to learn about white history or anything, but they expect us to like not get mad if they're like, oh, I don't want to learn about Black history. Like it needs to have, you have to have the same like idea towards it, because it's both history. So I don't get why people like favor one over the other. So like that's something that we need to held equally.
The whole opting out thing, I still think is necessarily freedom of speech, because you definitely have that right. You definitely have that opinion. But does that make you right? Does that justify the way you feel? Because like we all been saying, it's still a part of our history. We're not supposed to separate, each other. We're supposed to bring each other together. So I still think it's a part of that category of freedom of speech, but I don't think it's right.
Yes, and I agree with you, Tyler, and Andrea, what she was saying. What if I say I don't want to learn about white history? How would they feel about that? I feel like it should be the same with Black history, because if somebody say like I don't want to learn about that, blah blah blah, they're gonna be wrong, like you just said. That makes you. I'm not bashing nobody for saying that, but you kind of are in wrong. But I'm not bashing you. But like, what if I don't want to learn about that or that, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, those are awesome points, and I agree with you. I mean, my total opinion is I don't see how it is a freedom of speech issue per se. I think I'm along the lines of it's part of history, then it needs to be taught. I mean, why can this school board come in or the whatever and come in and say, I don't like this part of history, we're just going to cut this out. What's next? Desert Storm, we're going to cut that out. We're not going to learn about. You can opt out of learning about Desert Storm. Constitution, you can opt out of that. We don't need that part of history. It's history. That's all it is. I mean, if we're going to opt out of something, let's opt out of math. That's my opinion.
I'm with you on that one.
Yeah.
John, this isn't the first time that this has happened, by the way. On a global scale, this has happened in a number of different times, not just in the United States, and it's played to the detriment of that country. So Japan did this. They didn't teach what happened in World War II, where they essentially went in and did what they call the this is what they call it the rape of the king, and it's a really, really sad part of history that is documented, very well documented, actually. And a lot of Japanese kids our age, or your age, don't know because it's something that they decided to opt out of in the history courses. The same could be said about Germany. They've since rectified a lot of this, but there were, for a time, a large faction that had no idea about the Holocaust, or at least didn't understand what the Holocaust was because they weren't taught it in their own schools. It's very important that we recognize and understand our footprint and every footprint that kind of came beforehand, so that we really understand where it is that we come from and what it is that we did. And once we begin to understand that, we can begin to understand the power dynamics between privilege and oppression. And that's a huge conversation to have. Privilege versus oppression is at the basis of any civilization, and especially with regard to something like.
Yeah, and I think the whole idea of opting out in different countries, it can basically be a different way, because how much control do we have? How much control can we control basically in other countries? I think most thing we can do is just spread the word and public outcry, so that they will be forced to do something. But essentially, if you're not really there, it's kind of hard to say what you can and cannot do in that situation, in my opinion.
If the whole world knows that something is true,
yeah,
and we decide, as parochially, as just like a state or city, whatever it is, that this thing is not, that thing it'll persist, it'll continue to be a truth. And so what happens to the children that are taught that thing is not true? And in this case, we're not saying it's a lie, but we're saying it's not a truth by omission. By saying that we're not going to study that thing, we're omitting it from history as if it weren't something substantially important. What happens to those children that are not learning that information is now omitted?
I think they're at a disadvantage.
Why?
Essentially because they are not learning these things. So when they go out into, let's say they wanted to move to the States, or they go out to adventure these other places and other cultures, and then they finally learned it, everybody's kind of already caught up, so they can make mistakes that, may not be allowed, essentially. So that's why I feel like they're at a disadvantage, because they're not really learning these things, so they can ultimately not know what's going on.
Do you guys think of not learning these things will factor into people, now not a complete factor, mind you, but have some sort of a factor into people being racist or anti-Semitic, those types of things, against these cultures, because they don't know how it is, and maybe that they weren't taught those types of things. Just throwing that out there. What do you guys think?
But yeah, no, most definitely. There was this thing in Utah. I don't know if Tyler and you guys have heard of this, but it was Topaz. It was this right after World War II, these kind of work camps that they would force any Asian aligned Americans to go into. And I don't know if a lot of our state even knows about that, because even now I think a lot of them without knowing of the history of the oppressed around you, you are easily subjected to do what your ancestors did because you just don't know. And I think not knowing about these things instantly makes you ignorant and will end up making you do those things again.
I feel like, because like there's a lot of kids that what they learn and how they behave is from their parents, and some parents are ignorant to like what's going on. So like if they never, because like I know people that like were ignorant and like were racist and everything, and then they finally got educated, like they learned about like the true issues and everything going on, and they're like, whoa, like how come I never learned about this? Like this is wrong. They're like, what I'm doing is wrong, and then they have changed. So like if we can like make a difference with that and like make more people understand, then that's like the main goal, and that's what we should strive for, because like a lot of people literally their behavior is just from what they learn at home, and like sometimes the one thing they need is education, like being educated on the topic.
Yeah, and I'm gonna touch on what Josh has said about the instantly ignorant part. I think that can go two ways. First, I think that can go with, did the kid have a choice? Did his parents allow him to do that? And then that I think they can go the other way. Okay, if they did have a choice, then they are instantly ignorant. But like I think Andrea has said the right thing. For a while they're probably going to be clueless when it comes to these things because they just don't know. But if we educate them and we give them the tools of, hey, this is not right, this is going on, if we really tell them this is right, then like Andrea said, oh, her friend said that, oh, this is not right, okay, why did I learn this? And then that's where the transformation happens. But ultimately if it's a kid, I don't really think you can really call him instantly ignorant, because you have to deal with his environment and his choice.
Yes, and I agree with you, Tyler. Back to what I was saying earlier about like it all comes from like where you grew up at your house. So you never know what the parents may be telling their kids. So we have to look at that point of view. But like Andrea and Tyler was saying, like when you go to schools, this is why Black history should be taught in schools so we can educate ourselves and we have more knowledge of it. And be like, oh, okay, I never knew this based on what my parents said. So it can be like that.
This has been a great conversation. Let's wrap it up here. And I just want everybody to go around and share their final thoughts on today's discussion.
So my final thoughts are basically is we have to basically figure out, who has a choice and who doesn't. If you're a kid, you practically don't have a choice until you ultimately grow up. So then ultimately, I feel like we have to also educate these kids on, what's happening all around the world through social media, through, outlets, through schools. So we basically, it's a whole big train of educating people. And that's my thoughts.
And my last thoughts on it, in my opinion, I feel like Black history should be taught in schools and it shouldn't be optional, because I feel like everyone, even like me, everyone needs to educate themselves on Black history, because there's things that we probably don't know about it. So I feel like you never know like where people come from. So we all should educate ourselves. And with the whole situation on that, I feel like it shouldn't be optional. We all need to learn it.
So I think that Black history should be taught in schools, and it shouldn't be optional to opt out, because it should be treated as all other subjects are, because it is history. And I feel like it won't completely help eliminate racism, but it will help us get there someday in the future. And if it will help us, we should go for it.
I think not only should it be taught in schools, Black history, I think we need to give some sort of efforts to pay attention to Black history even as adults, or even when you're out of school in some way, because nobody's like perfect, and anyone above the age of like even anyone out of school really can forget. And I think that's probably the worst enemy here, is forgetting and then letting yourself become like a victim of being racist or bigoted towards someone.
I'm floored by all of what you're saying. I'm so impressed by each one of your minds. I love seeing young people of color coming to life, talking about these things and using their brains, even to look from the other perspective. Look, sometimes this is just not going to be the case with other people. Some people are not going to be able to do the thing where you dance on both sides and debate and figure it out. But I will say, don't let anybody blow you over. You know, don't let anybody take what is essentially, you know, a major characteristic that is yours in being Black, and make you feel devalued because that's something that you guys have, because it's part of your existence. Your Black is beautiful. And that sounds like a trite statement, but that's real. Your Black is beautiful. And it's made your minds beautiful. It's made your bodies beautiful. Everything about you boys and girls is beautiful. And I just want to make sure that you guys know that. I've learned a bunch in this session, so I appreciate Sean for having me on as a panelist.
Well, we appreciate you joining us, and I think we can all of us can applaud you and say thank you for sharing your voice and letting your voice be heard. You guys have been incredible. You have really discussed this issue well. Your thoughts have been well thought out. Your opinions were amazing, and it's been a great panel to discuss this. I encourage you to keep your voices, let your voices continue to be heard.
Guys, I just want to drop this one little nugget. You're going to hear this a lot in your life. I will tell you right now, the answer, in a way, they're trying to say something that is understandable, the people that might bring this up to you in your life. But the answer is never to stop talking about race. It's never, ever that. It's never the erasure of identity. It's not. It's accepting that people are different. That's the magic. That's what love and brotherhood and sisterhood, that's what family is about. It's knowing that I'm not the same as you are, and I accept that you are not the same as I am.
That was well said. That was a great way to end this conversation. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Again, thank you all for joining our panel. It's been great, and I hope that a lot of people can learn from and be educated and let their voices be heard. So thank you all for joining us. It's been great.
Well, see y'all.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.